Terrorism's data retreat hides emerging global threats. This is written by Shashi Tharoor. At first glance, the macroeconomic indicators of global security offer a rare moment of statistical comfort. Recent reports suggest that global terrorism experienced a noteworthy decline in 2025, with fatalities around the world falling to 5,582 across 2,944 recorded incidents, representing a 28% drop in deaths and a 22% reduction in overall attacks. With as many as 81 nations registering measurable improvements in their domestic security landscapes, a superficial reading of the data might suggest that the international community is finally turning the tide against terror, or as the strategists prefer to call it, asymmetric warfare. So, terrorism is referred to as asymmetric warfare by strategists. Yet, there lies a far more unsettling reality. The world is not necessarily becoming safer, it is becoming unevenly safe. How? The aggregate reduction in violence masks a profound structural mutation in how terror operates, where it thrives, and how we as a global society perceive it. It raises a haunting philosophical and strategic question. Have we begun to subconsciously accept terrorism not as a horrific aberration to be entirely eradicated, but as a normal tax on modern civilization? There is an insidious trap in treating aggregate declines as a triumph. When violence becomes highly concentrated, it risks becoming invisible to the global conscience. The data show that nearly 70% of all terrorism related deaths are now compressed into 5 countries. 70% nearly. Pakistan, Burkina Faso, Nigeria, Niger, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Sub-Saharan Africa, particularly the volatile Sahel region, alone accounts for over half of all global fatalities. Because the vast majority of this devastation occurs within these specific vulnerable geographies, the wealthier and more stable quarters of the world are prone to a dangerous complacency. When terrorism is confined to nations already beset by chronic systemic fragility, the international community tends to relegate it to background noise, a tragic feature of post-colonial states. This regional containment fosters a false sense of security. Not every terror incident is a Pahalgam, organized, ruthlessly planned, and flawlessly executed. The rise of decentralized, transnational, and rapid digital recruitment has facilitated lone actor attacks in many countries. When the methodology of terror shifts from massive, complex operations to low tech, high impact individual strikes incited on online echo chambers, the threat becomes an internalized ambient hazard of modern pluralistic societies. By treating this by treating these as an unavoidable operational hazard of the 21st century, we risk normalizing the unacceptable. Reaction to prevention. To prevent terrorism from metastasizing, metastasising further, counter-terrorism strategy must move away from reactive responses and towards addressing the structural ecology of extremist violence. There are two critical arenas where this intervention must take place: the blurring line between state conflict and terrorism, and the specific vulnerability of international frontiers. First, the data establishes an overwhelming correlation between political instability and violent extremism. An estimated 99% of all terrorism related deaths occur in nations already entangled in armed conflict. Terrorism is rarely an isolated phenomena generated in a vacuum. It is the ultimate byproduct of institutional or diplomatic collapse, where state capacity is hollowed out. Extremist groups swiftly step into the vacuum, offering alternative forms of primitive security or ideological certainty to disillusioned populations. Second, the geography of modern terror has become distinctly granular. Over 60% of attacks now take place within 100 kilometers of international borders. These frontier zones, frequently neglected or weaponized by central governments, offer ideal operational sanctuaries. In these porous margins, terrorist syndicates manage cross border movements, establish illicit supply lines, and conduct recruitment enabled or unhindered by state authority. Curbing this threat requires an intentional reinvestment in state capacity development and border sovereignty. If central authorities continue to treat borderlands as secondary priorities, they leave the door open for non state actors to entrench themselves. Furthermore, development assistance must be strategically aligned with security imperatives, treating the reinforcement of judicial systems, localized policing, and basic administrative services as the primary bulwarks against extremist encroachment. Whether the statistical downward trend recorded in 2025 will endure remains an open and highly precarious question. The contemporary security landscape is caught in a tug of war between institutional stabilization efforts and powerful destabilizing catalysts. The constriction of violent extremism to a smaller pool of actors, specifically the five dominant networks, namely the Islamic State, Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal Muslimin, JNIM, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan (TTP), Lashkar-e-Taiba, and Al-Shabaab, means that, so basically this constriction of violent extremism to a smaller pool of actors means that counter-terrorism forces can achieve maximum impact through highly focused intelligence and interdiction efforts. As the threat becomes more localized and frontier-centric, multinational intelligence apparatuses must become equally agile, disrupting cross-border logistics before they can scale into wider insurgencies. Tech platforms and state regulatory bodies must continue to refine their capabilities to detect and dismantle decentralized digital radicalization pipelines before they can catalyze lone actor violence. However, the headwinds militating against a sustained decline are formidable. The ongoing conflicts in West Asia threaten to completely reverse recent global gains. Prolonged warfare, mass displacement, and the systematic erosion of state institutions create a uniquely fertile breeding ground for extremist resurgence in 2026 and beyond. Prolonged warfare, mass displacement, and the systematic erosion of state institutions. The persistence of major geopolitical conflicts, including India-Pakistan, lowers the barriers to entry for new fragmented radical actors, further complicating the global threat matrix. Furthermore, even within the current downward trend, the stark resilience and adaptability of organizations such as the TTP, which bucked the general decline by increasing its attacks, serve as a potent warning. Modern terrorist organizations are highly adaptive entities. When squeezed globally, they fragment, localize, and embed themselves within existing domestic, ethnic, or political grievances, making them extraordinarily difficult to curb. The complacency trap, the ultimate lesson of the contemporary security paradigm, is that terrorism is not receding, it is simply reorganizing. The international community cannot afford to be lulled into a state of complacency by declining aggregates. It is simultaneously confronting a far more complex, resilient, and adaptive adversary. For nations such as India navigating an immediate strategic environment surrounded by highly volatile neighborhoods and cross-border security challenges, these transformations require a continuous sophisticated recalibration of both domestic and regional counter-terrorism doctrines. We must not surrender the moral and strategic clarity required to defeat it. The numbers may be falling, but the structural risks are not. True security will not be achieved by celebrating statistical lulls, but by relentlessly dismantling the fault lines of conflict, governance failures, and digital radicalization that allow the ideology of terror to survive. Fix the house. Governments should regulate social media platforms, not users. The more wicked the problem, the more the people yearn for a simpler solution. The more wicked the problem, the more the people yearn for a simpler solution. This tendency has complicated the public debate on how and how much social media harms teenagers. While the idea that these platforms were stoking a mental health crisis prevailed in several countries for long, researchers have now adopted a more cautious stance. Social media use and mental health are clearly associated, more so among girls, but how much of that is actually causal? And in what circumstances is still being debated. Recently, Prime Minister Modi spoke favorably of Australia's decision in 2024 to ban social media access for those aged 16 and below. His words augur a similar ban in India, one that Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka have publicly mulled as well. However, Australian psychologists, digital health researchers, child rights scholars, and online safety experts have criticized the ban because while there is a credible body of evidence linking social media use and harm among children, evidence of a link between an age based access ban and better mental health has been lacking. In the absence of a real world precedent, Australia has effectively been conducting a natural experiment, and research has estimated that around 85% of 12 to 16-year-olds still use social media platforms. While some psychologists and advocacy groups have argued that waiting for perfect evidence to act would recreate the mistake government made with tobacco, many experts believe that the state should drop the ban and instead adopt a stronger duty of care approach. Stronger duty of care includes digital literacy in school education, restrict addictive user interfaces or experiences, mandate a chronological feed for minors, enforce stronger content moderation, improve privacy protections, and introduce effective parental controls. Most studies of adolescent harm due to social media have also been observational and thus susceptible to reverse causation. That is, depressed teenagers may spend more time online and smaller average effects. Experts have also noted that hours per day is less explanatory than passive versus active engagement. That is, participation in supportive versus hostile communities, and so on. Indeed, while social media use can disrupt sleep and increase exposure to cyberbullying, addictive recommendation patterns and content that's about self-harm and eating disorders, it can also help maintain friendships and explore one's identity, offer peer support, and increase access to LGBTQIA plus communities and mental health information. The overall picture is mixed and the solutions are not simple. However, the first step could be, rather than regulate who may enter, government should change how platforms operate.